Have you ever looked up to the sky at night and wondered to yourself, what is the meaning of life? Well, as it turns out, there are multiple competing options, and so in this video, to navigate this fact, I'm going to be taking multiple different meanings of life and ranking them on a handy tier list. Now, I should be clear off the bat that when I use the word meaning, I'm not talking about some religiously objective force ordained upon us from above, but nor am I pretentiously obfuscating by using spiritual, undefinable language. When I talk about having meaning of your life, I mean it in the same way that we can talk about meaning in a sentence. Letters on their own hold no intrinsic value. They are arbitrary symbols representing random sounds you can make with your mouth. But when you begin to string these letters together in sentences using a specific grammar, then meaning can emerge. And by that exact same principle, our universe may be nothing more than a materialistic collection of atoms with no intrinsic value. But by understanding our world through the lens of a specific philosophy, a kind of spiritual grammar, it can slowly become something greater than the sum of its parts. These mere atoms can coalesce into family members or objects which hold significance for us. They can give us a sense of motivation or purpose. They can start to mean something to us. And so what I'm talking about when I reference the meaning of your life is the concept which your philosophy orbits around, to guide your thoughts and behavior towards something greater. So let's start off with the first one, self-improvement. Now, given that I am ostensibly a self-improvement channel, making videos about how to become more confident or appreciate your friends more, you might be expecting me to place this somewhere higher on the list, but I'm going to be a little bit controversial here and place self-improvement in the C tier. Now, that doesn't mean that self-improvement is a bad thing. I should be clear that the tiers on this graph don't represent a linear progression of quality, but instead represent different ways that you should approach these concepts. Things in S or A tier are things that I would feel comfortable recommending to someone as the primary meaning in their life. Things in B and C tier are worth holding onto as sources of meaning, but should never be the only source of meaning in your life. Instead, you should combine them with things in the higher tiers, or use them as temporary motivators for specific seasons of your life as you gently transcend to the higher tiers, kind of like in Maslow's hierarchy, where you're expected to fill out the lower rungs before eventually reaching something higher. And D and F tier are things that you should approach with extreme caution, as they are generally destructive if held as one of your primary motivations. And so the reason that self-improvement is so low is because there is a simple yet unavoidable question that it's just not able to answer. What are we self-improving towards? What's the goal here? Like, improving your health, confidence, and fitness is a noble pursuit, but unless there's some goal underlying that, the only thing you're really improving is your ego. Because let's be honest, most of the popular self-improvement channels don't talk about self-improvement so you can become a person who makes the world a better place and improve your kindness towards others. They talk about self-improvement so you can get more women and money, material objects which don't matter in the long term. And I shouldn't have to explain to you why following your ego is an inherently spiritually corrupt pursuit. When you only care about yourself, the fellow humans around you transform into nothing more than objects to be used instrumentally for your benefit. But the ironic thing about that is that it doesn't even make you happy, as thinking about yourself, being conscious of yourself, is the definition of self-consciousness. Thinking about yourself is synonymous with misery.
There is no difference between thinking about yourself and being miserable. They load on the same statistical axis.
Chasing status as well, which I'm going to put in D tier, is marginally better than ego, as then at the very least you are focused outwards and are at least considering what other people think of you, but will ultimately fall you into the same materialistic traps. And speaking of materialism, let's talk about money. Now, most archetypical fables within the Western canon sing the same song when it comes to money. Whether it's King Midas, Ar-Pharazôn the Gold, Cruella de Vil, or Scrooge McDuck, the message is the same. Money is an evil, corrupting force that you should stay away from. But I can't help but suspect that there's at least an element of Nietzschean slave morality at play here, because I'm going to go out on a whim and say something controversial here, that money is actually pretty underrated, and I'm going to be putting it in B tier. There has certainly been a cultural shift recently, with multiple philosophers and commentators re-signifying money not as a spiritually corrupting force, but on the first step of a greater spiritual journey.
First part of your life you learn, second part of your life you earn, third part of your life you return.
Because money is, at its core, just the power that can give you freedom. So provided that you do the right things with this freedom, money can be a liberating force.
Agree that the purpose of money is security when it comes to happiness.
And so as its placement within B tier suggests, money, if combined with a higher value, can actually be good for you. But I can hear what everyone at home is saying. Money can't buy happiness. Well, I don't think it should, because happiness, I'm gonna place in D tier. Because happiness, according to the hedonist philosophers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, is supposed to be what all this was for. Human experience is the reason that things matter. And so surely having the ever-famous pursuit of happiness being the meaning of your life would be a good thing. But what this view doesn't take into account is the paradox of hedonism. Put very simply, the reason that humans feel pain is as a motivator to undertake actions which make our survival more likely. So for example, when we need food, we feel hunger. When we need sleep, we feel tired. And so when there is a need for something, when you desire something, it is in those moments when you are suffering. As the Buddhists say, desire is the root of all suffering. And so if you are pursuing happiness, if in this moment you desire it, then by definition, you are not currently experiencing it. If you place happiness on the distant horizon as the goal you're moving towards, then you are by definition not experiencing it right now, because it can't be in two places at once. Happiness is something that you achieve through experiencing higher values. It can't be a value in and of itself. So let's aim ourselves at the highest value we can possibly think of. Let's place God on the tier list. Now, hopefully I shouldn't be offending any of my fellow atheists when I say that God is an absolute A tier. God and the love he inspires is the fundamental foundation for everything from Alcohol Anonymous to Western civilization itself. God is the Father that created us and imbued his intrinsic love through all beings. God is the voice inside your heart which calls you to great adventures. God is the reason to be kind to people intrinsically, not because you have anything to gain from it. A famous philosopher once said, "I don't believe in God, but I certainly hope that my service mate does," because the reality is that people who believe that there is an objective, greater moral power who wants them to be good are likely to follow this path and just consistently become better people. God has the power to both transform individual lives and then galvanize communities around that transformation with a genuine heartfelt desire to bring it to more people. You will not see more joy or love in the eyes of a fellow human than when you see them loving people around them in the light of God. And so if I have so many good things to say about this entry, why have I only put it in A tier? Well, recently I made an observation that I think is pretty unique and that no one else has ever figured out before. God isn't actually real. I think I'm the first person to figure that out. Well, sure, in the metaphorical Jordan Peterson sense, God is true in the sense that he is an idea which allows us to understand truths about the world. He is not in a literal sense real. There is simply no evidence for this Father Creator above us, which makes the concept of God significantly incompatible with various scientific discoveries. It also, as Friedrich Nietzsche pointed out, risks falling into what he called the ascetic ideal, when you sacrifice things in your real actual life for the hope of gaining something in a hypothetical spiritual life like heaven. God has also been used historically to fuel multiple kinds of bigotry, so God just has too many flaws to place in S tier. But what if we were to strip away the fictional allegorical elements and just follow the underlying philosophy that God is supposed to represent? What if instead of believing in God, we believed in a more abstract concept like virtue? Well, in that case, I would place it in S tier. Virtue is the first meaning which I can unequivocally and wholeheartedly advocate for. There's a reason that my channel description reads an embodied philosophy of virtue. Virtue is notoriously difficult to define, and so I'll definitely be making a more in-depth video on my philosophy on this in the future, but for now, just understand that virtue has something to do with the nature of goodness. There are multiple things in the world that we can call good. Happiness is good, kindness is good, strength is good, beauty is good, truth is good, but sometimes in life you are put in positions where you have to sacrifice one to attain another. For example, if you Photoshop an image of something, you might make it more beautiful, but you have sacrificed the truth of the photo. But in other cases, increasing one kind of beauty also increases another. If you're writing a book and the characters feel really true to life, that makes your story more beautiful for the reader to read. And so the nature of virtue is about investing in structures which are more like this second example, where different kinds of goodness coalesce together to infinitely spiral upwards. Where instead of monastically focusing on one pursuit and ruining your life in the process, you acknowledge that each element of your life is equally worth taking care of, and so follow a more holistic path of self-improvement, where you don't just want to be strong, but you want to be kind at the same time. You want to appreciate beauty and experience everything life has to offer while still staying in touch with truth. Virtue is the idea that goodness can correlate with itself, and that all of your actions should be motivated by this greater desire. Virtue is the idea that if you embrace it wholeheartedly, goodness can begin to correlate with itself, and it's this principle that I try and live every second of my life by. But if all this talk of God and spirituality is a little bit too much for you, then you might instead want to consider absurdism, the philosophy of Albert Camus that states that the search for meaning is inherently a dumb idea. Now, I am not a big fan of absurdism. I'm placing it in C tier, but I do want to at least start by talking about some of its positives. Meaning is beautiful, but it can also be fetishized. If you're not careful, instead of following meaning itself, you can follow the idea of meaning and end up destroying yourself. Because if you constantly tell yourself that there's got to be something more, something deeper and higher that you should be aspiring to, then you forget to ever enjoy what you actually have. And so Camus advocated for a kind of positive nihilism, where you acknowledge that there's no meaning in the universe, but claim that that's actually a good thing, because without the need to pursue this thing, you can just live your life day to day and say, what I already have is enough. And the ability to notice when you're fetishizing meaning, the ability to let go and say that what you have is enough, is important, but I just don't think that absurdism is the right lens to accomplish this by. Because while Camus was right that meaning is not some magical force in the universe, dismissing the concept entirely is also a massive mistake. Because like it or not, meaning objectively is a feeling the human brain is capable of experiencing, and throwing away one of our most important and deeply held feelings is never going to result in good. Because without the positive aspects of meaning, how are you meant to understand what you value? How are you meant to find people who value the same things? How are you meant to join a community, which obviously I'm placing in S tier? Because community means something deeper than just relationships and friends around you that you enjoy in the moment. Communities are organized in a special structure around some values that they believe in a deeper sense. I have an entire video going into the nature of communities and why they're so important if you want to learn more about this topic, but for now I'll just give you the short version. Communities don't just help you meet new people, they strengthen and embolden the relationships you already have. Communities are the ultimate tool for self-improvement. As when humans are around each other, they naturally begin coming up with rules and rituals to regulate each other's behavior to force everyone to become better. Communities are a diverse collection of friends and elders and lovers and rivals and hosts and leaders that both facilitate interactions which give you beautiful experiences that make life worth it and change you as a person, emboldening your value. Communities is one of the most important things that you can have in life, and they're simply not possible under an absurdist framework. And related to the idea of community is the concept of tradition. Now, tradition comes in many forms. They can be ancient and cultural, but we are also seeing new traditions emerge in the age of the internet. The concept of an alpha male, for example, is a new tradition in its own right. And I'm placing tradition precisely in the middle in B tier because it simultaneously has the ability to improve your life and ruin it at the same time. Traditions at their core are basically blueprints on how to be a human. They are pre-packaged identities with sets of rituals that send you on a certain path, facilitating your growth. And so when you have a good, positive tradition, like say the Judeo-Christian canon, whose rituals serve the purpose of making you embrace the higher values which I've been praising so much, that's an amazing thing to be a part of. But when you have a questionable, harmful tradition like a cult, that does the exact opposite, ensuring your failure. And so tradition in and of itself is a value-neutral concept. It's more like a modifier that when placed next to your other values makes them stronger. But if tradition, as I've described it, doesn't quite do it for you, then instead you may want to embrace authenticity. Now, the benefits of authenticity are very obvious. You certainly wouldn't ever want to fall into the opposite, which is lying. Like if you're following any of these higher values, but you're not doing it in an authentic way, then what was even the point? Authenticity is an essential principle that should run through the rest of your philosophy. But to place authenticity as the center of your philosophy in and of itself comes with some serious downsides. Like, here's a really obvious example. Imagine if you had someone who was a serial killer. For this person, being authentic would mean continuing to be evil, because authenticity just breaks down to the point of absurdity if you try and follow it religiously. But it's also impossible to organize communities purely around the concept of authenticity. Imagine if you have a space like a library with specific rules that you need to be quiet. If you enter this space and authentically desire to talk loudly to the person next to you, then you're being an asshole. As Thomas Hobbes points out in his famous philosophy book Leviathan, it's only by limiting your individual freedoms that we're able to come together and form a greater society that's better for everyone. And so authenticity is like salt. It should always be on your meal, but it should never be your meal. And so a good antidote to this kind of authenticity is the concept of adventure. If authenticity is about being true to yourself, then adventure is about being true to the person who you want to be. As Jordan Peterson puts it, if you just listen to your consciousness, it will tell you things, whether or not you want to hear them. If you're not challenging yourself, your conscience will tell you to do more. If you're doing something you know to be immoral, your conscience will tell you to do something else. And so by learning to listen to that voice inside your head and bravely climbing whatever mountain it tells you to climb, you will inevitably find yourself aligning with many of the values I've already spoken about. Regularly challenging yourself for the sake of challenging yourself is inherently valuable. Recently, I went through my first ever MMA fight, and it was a transformative experience that I wouldn't give up for the world. And so if there is something your heart is telling you to undertake, like skydiving or starting an artistic project, the only thing I can tell you is that you should do that. Because whether you succeed or fail, you are guaranteed to learn something deep from this process, and adventure is precisely what will take you there. And while we're on the topic of listening to our own consciousness, I also want to bring up enlightenment, which could be a synonym with meditation or Buddhism, which I'm putting in A tier. Mindfulness as a concept is all about acknowledging that the feelings and thoughts you have in your head are not authored by you. Instead, you are a passive observer to these things. An extremely simple observation which you can spend a lifetime attempting to understand, which is absolutely a noble pursuit. I have an entire video going over why I think meditation is so beautiful. But the reason that it can't be S tier is because meditation misses out a simple thing. Peace is beautiful when you are experiencing it in the moment, but eventually you're gonna have to stand up from that, walk out into the world, and embrace some real values to help you navigate that fact. And so unless you're going to be a complete monk and dedicate your life to this pursuit, meditation can only ever be a part of your greater meaning. And so what might you pick as this greater meaning? Well, something that a lot of people would advocate for is love. Love as the meaning of life in and of itself is a beautifully romantic ideal, but is sadly one that I can only place into B tier. Because while love is one of the strongest motivators you can possibly have and acts as a perfect antidote to selfishness, love also has some serious flaws. Because to put it simply, if you require someone other than yourself to fulfill you, well then, there you go, you're not self-fulfilled. And so without a deeper value to fall back on, love on its own will inevitably end up with you using other people to get some sense of validation. But that's a self-defeating cycle, because the second that you are objectifying and using someone for instrumental gain, then you are no longer loving them intrinsically, and it stops being true love. Because on its own, obsessively needing someone else to complete you is no different from being a sex addict, which obviously is an F tier. And so for the final entry on the tier list, I want to talk about the last thing I'm putting in S tier, and that's one of my favorite topics, purpose. Purpose is all about having a strong feeling about how the world works, having a strong feeling about how it should work, and then making yourself useful to make that transition. All humans have something of value that they can offer the world, and so by finding what that value is and then using 100% of your effort to use that value to help other people is the most beautiful pursuit you can ever be a part of. Like, you know, when people talk about wanting to be part of something greater than themselves, that is exactly what purpose is. And it directly follows that structure of meaning I talked about in the beginning. You take yourself, a mere single human who on your own may not have any value, and you give that will up to serve something greater, becoming both happy in yourself and useful to the world around you. I've made a video in the past about how to find your purpose in life, but to summarize it simply, just look to the world around you, find something that you wish was different, and then put all of your energy into making that the case. And my favorite thing about purpose is that it perfectly coalesces with the other values in S tier. If you are in a culture that genuinely values virtue, then everyone around you is going to look up to something higher. They're going to start caring deeply about values. This will force them to organize communities to achieve these values. And when you are in a community, you will naturally discover what this community needs, which will show you your purpose and make you more virtuous in the process. If you want to drill down my entire self-improvement YouTube channel into a simple philosophy, then here it is. The meaning of life is about communing with virtue, joining a community of people who feel the same, and then finding your purpose within it, because I can't think of anything more beautiful than that. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and remember to stay virtuous.